when I was a kid, I had this kind of strange thing that happened to me that changed the trajectory of literally my whole life, which is what ultimately led to the NDE. But it all started when I was about seven-ish, and I was just playing toys alone, like no big deal. And something like spoke to me, and it was kind of odd. Something kind of spoke to me, and I got some visions, and it was talking about like the pain of others, and it was trying to convey others' pain. And I saw visions, a lot of war. I saw a lot of like tanks and people running and children and just dirt. And but it was more than just the vision; it was the emotion that came with the vision. That I felt people's like pain and suffering, and how it was something that was very, very worldwide, and how souls and people were suffering. And so this thing was kind of talking to me about it, understanding it, almost things like, what would you be willing to do, or would you be willing to do anything to help bring down the pain of others? It was kind of a weird thing to ask a 7-year-old, and I've always been a very loving person, so I just was thinking to myself, well, yeah, I would do whatever I could do. So it's kind of one of these weird little conversations, and for some reason, one of the things that I learned, it took a long time, that within us, the very source of our greatest joy and our greatest light, and the things that connect us ultimately to source or God or whatever word you want to call it, that place is also a very like gentle and sensitive place. And this is why when children come into the world, like for example, Jesus would say things like, you must be like a child to enter the kingdom of God. When you're a child, their hearts are so open. But if you've ever noticed, if you say just a little mean thing to a child, it really hurts them, and they can cry about it because their hearts are so open that if you poke at it, you can hurt them easier. And as you age, I've noticed this pattern a lot. People's hearts are actually slowly closing. They don't realize it, but then all of a sudden you're older, and it's because you're guarded. The world is a crazy place. So this is kind of how my journey started, in regards to making a decision to try to dig into the deeper parts of my soul or my heart. That ultimately, if you go deep enough, at the source of it, we're all one and we're all connected. So digging in there really brought out like some pain that is in others that I began to experience, and it just crushed me. I mean, as a kid, the pain was so unexplainable and so big, and nothing had happened to me. I never had like some traumatic thing happen to me as a kid. My childhood was good. I had great parents. Everything was fine. And so it was very weird that I was going through this. And of course, nobody around me understood it, and I came from a Catholic family, and, we'd go to church and I would pray, and just nothing was happening, which is why I started like kind of questioning whether God really existed, and I was always wondering, when are we going to meet him? I remember asking these type of questions as a kid. And the answers that I got, I still remember the very first time that I was being spoken to about God. Some little voice again inside of me, after I received the explanation, was, they don't know. So people who are trying to tell me about God, I'm getting these, as a kid, I'm like receiving messages that showing me very clearly in like my heart and my soul that these people tell me about God don't really know God. And a lot of people, I don't want to say a lot of people don't know. Everybody's at different levels, and there's no judgment about that. But I don't think, I for whatever reason, I was just born this way, and I had this kind of longing to try to find certain answers. And this pain accelerated that. It's like I needed to find an answer to make this pain subside. And the pain became too big, though. I was so little, and I had zero guidance. And, I started contemplating ending my life a lot because the pain was too much for my soul to bear. And that continued, and I sadly attempted to poison myself multiple times, actually. The first time was around 10 years old or so, maybe 11, right around there. And obviously I didn't succeed, and then I tried again and I didn't succeed. And I think every time I was probably damaging my body a lot, because it was kind of causing some medical issues as time went on. And then I just reached the point where I was so frustrated that I'd failed so much, and I decided to do something very extreme. And I would have these like Costco-sized bottles of pills, that I could find in the cupboards. And I was like, I just have to do something extreme to try to end my life, and just a lot of suffering. There really was a lot of suffering. I didn't see any beauty. I couldn't see the beauty in trees and mountains nature. And it felt like it was really hard to explain this to people, but have you ever had a nightmare like most people have? And have you ever woken up from a nightmare and you still kind of feel like that weird presence of a nightmare? And it felt like that for me, but like every day. So every day I would wake up, it was like that all day long. And I remember little birds that used to sound like they were beautiful singing birds. They actually sound like they were yelling at me. They're like, "Pia, pia," and it just was like, it felt horrible. Everything felt like it was yelling at me, and everything felt so dark and heavy, and it just wore down. It wore me down after a while. And so the thing that really kicked off the NDE was when I tried to take 1,000 pills, and I almost reached it, but I just couldn't go on after about 830 something pills or so. I just couldn't go anymore. And on top of it, I took alcohol with it, because you always read on the labels, don't take alcohol with stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And then I got very sick. I would have like blackouts, and I would kind of see things almost like I don't want to call them demons, but almost stuff like that. And then things would just go black, and then I would wake up, and I was kind of in and out of consciousness, and I felt like I was dying. I mean, I really felt like I was dying. I was so sick, and I remember feeling very like, if you can ever hear your heartbeat, like my heart would just stop and things would go dark, and it was pretty severe. I did it around midnight, and then I was found the next day. I'd survived, and I was found around 6, 7 in the morning or something. I was taken to the emergency room, but I was told that there's nothing they can do for me. They're like, you've already took these things a long time ago, hours. And so they did a few things like pump my stomach and stuff just for the heck of it, they said, but they didn't think they could do much for me. And then that was the first time when I was in the hospital room by myself. There was like these beings of light standing next to my bedside, and I was trying to ignore them, because I think it's important for your audience to know that my personality is like, I'm kind of a skeptic. I'm actually kind of a big skeptic. Not that I don't believe in things, I'm very open-minded, but I typically need some form of proof. And I'm not somebody who falls for things very quickly or easily. And so I was trying to ignore these beings, but they were talking with one voice. They kept repeating the same thing, and I would have this almost like visions, but also like premonitions about the future. It was kind of hard to describe, but they were telling me, you'll never do it again. You'll never do it again. You'll never do it again. And they kept repeating it, almost like programming me to where I would never try to do what I just had done ever again, even though I was actually already planning it in my head. And so there was this little bit of an internal war. I'm like, you guys are so wrong. But when they would speak, it felt like they were right. It was so hard to describe. So I kept thinking that wasn't going to be the case. I remember the doctor walking into and having a word with me saying, hey, we see here that it shows that you took, a lot of pills. And I'd like you to tell me the truth about what you really took. And I said, this is the truth. And I was kind of curious, like, why would you be asking me that? And that's when he told me, he said, it's impossible. He said, nobody could take that many pills and survive. He said, it's just not possible. And I was curious about what would happen. And he said it would have just destroyed my heart, basically. And that was the end of that, because I ended up getting out of the hospital. I don't remember if it was 1 or 2 weeks, something like that. And then when I got out, I found out shortly, a few months later or so, that I had a major heart condition. I had done severe damage to my heart, and I was told that it would probably end my life. And I thought to myself, great, this is what I wanted. So everything will be fine. I never got it treated, never thought about it, and just lived my life. But it was very shortly after that I started having a lot of medical issues. And I started doing a lot of I was always trying to read and understand things like, Christianity. I would read the Bible, which made no sense to me, by the way. I would read Buddhist books, I would read Taoism, I would read a lot of different spiritual books. And I reached the point where I was like extremely frustrated, because you hear about all these like the astral projection, and you leave your body, or you meditate and you go to these places, and Jesus walking on water or whatever, and all these different things. And no matter what I did, I never felt like I could achieve something like that. I would try to meditate, I would try things, and this pain inside just wouldn't go away. and I would go to churches. I got baptized. I became a Christian, though that didn't really change anything. I just tried everything. And I kind of felt like if I ever was to strike gold, that this pain would go away. Like I was the canary in the coal mine. And if I could find whatever the truth was, it would fix this. And so after all these years, I wasn't finding what I was hoping to find. And so I was basically ready to give up. And in my mind, I hadn't even told anybody. It was just the internal decision that I wanted to completely give up on any spiritual search and become almost, I don't want to say cold because I'm not a cold person, but I wanted to just accept the things of this world and be like, you know what, maybe I should just get the mortgage, get the wife, have the kids, like just live a normal life because I wasn't normal. This wasn't normal. And so then I was having this plan of doing this within maybe 1 month, 2 months. I'm thinking about it. And this opportunity comes up, and this is where the NDE really comes up. Obviously, the backstory of all this. I'm going with two people that are good friends of mine. One of them is actually my brother, and I say he's my friend because he's like my best friend, and another friend and myself. So there's just three of us, and we went to this beautiful naturey spot, and we were just going to kind of hang out and have fun. And there's a canyon. We walked in. There's a river, and we're just hanging out, have a beautiful day. Everything's fine. And then all of a sudden, I feel the strangest feeling coming over me where it's almost like a sense of peace, but at the same time, it was something calling me. And I longed for silence, which was a little unusual, right? Because I'm here hanging out with my friends. I'm not looking to be quiet and go sit down in a corner by myself. And so it was so strong, though, that I basically told them, I said, guys, I'm really sorry. I know we're all the way out here, but I'm going to want to spend a little time alone. And they were like, okay, no problem. Enjoy yourself. And so we're by the river, and I have a name for this day. I call it the day on the rock. And I start walking up the river, and I'm walking up the river for a while until I'm pretty far away, and the river's really loud. And I find this giant rock, and I sit on this rock, and I just sit there and let this feeling kind of, dare I say, guide me, whatever it is. I don't know. I just went with it, with the feeling. And I'm just sitting there listening to the water because it's right by me. The river's running pretty strong. And I decided to finally close my eyes, and that's when I remember I could hear my heartbeat, when you focus enough. And I heard how it would stop. And I knew that I had a heart condition at this point, and I knew that that's supposed to be what was supposed to end my life. And it would stop, and then all of a sudden it would start again. And each pause felt a little longer. And as it started going longer, I started almost like, I decided to just go into silence because silence felt easy, which meditation can sometimes be very difficult. So it was kind of weird that it was all happening at this moment. And I just thought, okay, just go with it. And that's when I started down what I call the dark corridor. I think there's even a Bible verse that to me reminds me of it, as it says, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And in Buddhism, they call it being tempted by the three sisters of Mara, or the three daughters of Mara, something like that. And because it was so similar to that, I'm walking down this corridor, and it feels like things are starting to tempt me, and they want my attention. But I'm like, I'm not going to listen. I'm going to embrace what it is that I'm feeling. And I hear my heart, and every time it stops, I feel like I'm inching ever so closely, and it feels like to death. And I'm just like accepting it. I'm like, okay, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen right here today. And I just was fine with it. And as I got deeper, the temptation changed to trying to make me a little more afraid. And I would ignore it, and I would stay in my peace. And then I would go even deeper. My heart continued to stop. Even my breathing would have these long pauses, I noticed. And then as I got to the end of the corridor, then it really ramped up. At that point, it was almost as if something internally knew all my fears. It was really weird, and it was wanting to use them. Anything it could tempt me with, anything it could make me fear. And at the very end, I literally saw my body laying down on the earth. And when I saw my body, bugs started crawling all over it. And that's what I have a fear of, spiders and scorpions and bugs. And they're starting crawling into my ears and my nose and my whole body. And I wanted to panic. And I knew that that's what it wanted. It wanted me to panic. It wanted me to not be at peace, because what I was feeling was peace. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to let it do it. I'm not going to react at all. Just let it do what it's going to do. And they literally are covering my entire body, and I could see the shape of my body. And that's when it began to like sink, almost like it was decomposing into the earth. And once it went all the way and the earth went flat, everything just went dark. Boom. And I couldn't see anything. It was almost as if I was dead. Everything was gone. I wasn't even hearing my heartbeat anymore. And I think it took about 5-10 seconds. I don't really remember the exact number. It could have been as many as 20 seconds. And then there was this boom, just burst of light. You can't see anything. Just burst of light. And it's a being. I just couldn't see her at first because it's so much light. And then you could kind of see that there was a face. And of course, there's no sex, just to clarify for people. There's no sex when it comes to this being. But the energy was so strongly female. I mean, it was clearly female. And the patience, the beauty, the love, the compassion, like it was all emanating off of her, unlike any human I've ever met. There is no human that I believe walks the earth that could hold a candle to this. And the moment she was in front of me, I didn't even think about what I was saying, because on the other side, things are kind of like everything operates from the heart. So like your heart is totally exposed. You're like totally naked. Everything can be seen. And I immediately just said, I want to be like you. It was so immediate, because this had been a long road. This had been going on for like 20 years from the beginning of my suffering, because it happened around 27-ish. And when it happened, I knew that it was everything that I was looking for. I mean, she was joy too. The peace, the joy, the love, everything that I would have ever wanted to be as a human. She was embodying it right in front of me. And so what I told her was, I said, I want to be like you. And I'll always remember her response, because she said, you are me and I am you. And I thought, that's not true. I literally tried to argue with her. I'm like, look at me. Look at, like, my heart was so exposed. I just pointed at it. I'm like, look at all my flaws. I have so many flaws. Look at you. She was like perfection. If you would have guessed what God was like or is like, that would have been it. That's what I thought was God. Little did I know that I was about to meet God, and he was not like that. In fact, he's so different than most of our ideas that we wouldn't even recognize him, even if we were before him. But I said that to her. She responded. And when she responded, and I'm trying to show them the not good things about me, she never would say a word, because it felt like she said, I spoke truth, and that's the end of it. She didn't repeat herself. That was it. No matter what I said, no matter me, no, look at this. I'm trash. I'm not like you. There's no way I'm like you. And she just, in her stillness, in her peace, in her compassion, in her love. And I noticed later on, it took me a while to realize that her clothing was this light, but her clothing was coming from her heart. So that's why I could feel all those emotions, because her clothing was her emotion. The best example I can give in this world, like in the human world, our clothing a lot of times depicts who we are. So if you're like in a hospital and you're wearing a white coat, and they're like, oh, you're a doctor. If you're at court and there's a judge with a black robe, you're a judge. If a police officer has his outfit on, you're a police officer, or a fireman, and so on and so forth. Like, our clothing dictates or tells the world who we are. In that world, your clothing comes from your heart, and your heart says who you are. And that's why there's a lot of things that were taught to me when I was on the other side. And a lot of them were ironically scriptural verses, because I'm not even a Bible thumper. I never understood it. So I let that go. But how many things they showed me, like there's a Bible verse that says God judges the heart. It's not about judging other things. He just judges your heart. Your heart says it all, because all our actions, all our thoughts, everything really comes from the heart, good or bad. So then it took a turn where I spent some time with her, and it was comforting. It felt like the ultimate mother. It was kind of wild. And then she reached out her hand, and I took her hand, and that's when I didn't know that she started taking me into the heavens. So we started flying away. And as we were flying away, I felt all my attachments all of a sudden. So all of a sudden, I felt all my attachments to every person that I knew, friends, family, everything that was my quote-unquote life. And then my biggest attachment, which was to this body. So this body, this ego being, I could see it all and feel it all. And it was very hard to say goodbye, because in this place, I didn't feel sad. I felt all this elatedness and love, and everything was so great. that all of a sudden I didn't want to leave planet Earth because I felt all this love for everybody. And it was my love that connected me to everything. And so it made me want to stay. And the only thing, Sabrina, that got me to make a decision, which is to leave everything, all my family, everybody, including my own body, was the pain and the suffering that I had endured for so long. That was my life. So I kind of reminded myself, I didn't feel the pain, but I reminded myself, hey, don't you remember you wanted this? You wanted to end yourself and leave this place. And so I thought to myself, like, oh my gosh, that's right. Um, okay, so it was a difficult decision, but I was like, I'm going to leave them all. This is my opportunity to go back home, to leave, Earth. And so I took it. And it wasn't easy, but I did it. And then once I made that decision, we flew off. And then that's when I also learned that stars are like portals. You might call them stargates or star doors. And she took me to a star, and the moment we went through it, and it's almost like portals for the soul, not so much for the flesh. And when we went through it, boom, the speed was so fast. I can't even begin to describe how fast it was. We started going at an immense speed until we reached a different star. And from there, we would take another one and jump in a different direction. And then we'd travel that way at an immense speed. And we were going up and down and left and right. And you don't know what north and south or up or down is. It's so fast and so many different directions. And I was lost. I knew very clearly that there's no way I'm finding my way back. You're not seeing planet Earth anymore. It is a long ways away. And so I just kind of surrendered. And I let this being of light just take me. And somehow it was kind of odd that the more we traveled, it felt like we were merging slowly, almost like what they call fusion in the stars, but we were like coming together somehow. And so when we finally arrived at the destination, it was like she was like 3/4 part of me. It was kind of odd and difficult to describe. And then the moment I arrived, there was all these beings in a circle, and they looked like monks. So first I start with the being of light, like this lady. These guys are monks. They're like wearing like these orange, maybe even kind of reddish robes, and they all spoke with one voice, and they were like a council of sorts. And the voice that they spoke with was, they just said, "We've been waiting for you." And when they said that, all this flooding of information in my soul was conveyed to me. How they've been watching me for a long time, how they've been following me literally before I was even born. So they knew that I was going to be born. There was like this whole backstory almost that I wasn't aware of. And I felt really bad because they said, "We've been waiting for you." And, I don't want to like take anything out of the story, but they said one more thing to me that honestly is like kind of private just for me. So it doesn't need to be heard by everybody, but they said something else to me about my journey. And I felt so bad because I didn't realize they'd been waiting for me for so long. And their patience, you could feel it. It was eternal. They could just sit there my whole life and I never find them, and that they would have waited there just waiting for me. And there was something that they really wanted me to do. And what was odd about this whole thing is that each one of them have felt as if they had already lived a life, and it had something to do with a big plan that God has, which is kind of odd because we don't know his plan. His plan is so big and so complex. We're not going to get it. And so each one of these beings was carrying out a piece of his plan, and they had already lived a life. And then there was one spot left in this particular circle, and they were kind of letting me know, this spot's for you. And it was all kind of confusing. And when, like I said, when they spoke, they'd speak with one voice. So it was like it was kind of hard to describe. And so then one of them started making a sound. So here I'm standing before them. In fact, it's kind of odd, but I found this picture that's kind of similar, not exactly the same, but it was just kind of weird because see how this being is with somebody and they're on this cloud, I guess, but notice there's a ray of light on their head, kind of like the woman who was the light, and they're with you on the journey. And then there's a circle. You can see this is a big part of a circle, but then these are different. It shows like angels and stuff. But I thought it was so weird that picture is in here. And this is kind of another similar one too. Again, that being with you. There's like a type of almost like a guide. And so one of these beings starts making a sound, and I almost can't describe it almost, but it sounds like a type of He's like, and then the next one goes, like each one of them started making a sound, and each sound was interacting with the previous sound, and all these sounds that they're making are literally like somehow interacting with each other, and then it started to open like almost like a door at the center of them, and then they didn't even have to tell me. I felt a sense of honor, like I was really grateful that they were doing this for me. It was because they had opened a door in a way, but I didn't know. I just felt it, and I just decided, okay, I guess I'm going to go through this door. And I went through the door, and then on the other side, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know what was happening. I was just going with it, kind of natural, like breathing. And then that's when I met God. I did not expect, to meet him, but I didn't even know it was him, because I walked through and I am standing before the biggest thing I've ever seen. It is so massive, you can't even begin to try to fathom with the human mind. It was just so big. And it's out in the universe, out in the cosmos. And the interesting part is not so much what he looked like, actually. The interesting part is more what he sounded like and the way that he moved. And he moved like a river. So he was flowing like a river, and he was huge. Think of like an ocean that moves like a river, but much bigger than the ocean. And I literally am just standing before him, and there's so many colors, and there's like what looks like stars, and just so much was there. And I started walking into him, and it was literally like a scene out of a movie, because I'm walking into him the way that you would walk into a river. It would look a lot like baptism, which is kind of ironic. And then once I got in him, I just opened up my arms, and I just laid back, and I laid in him just like if you were laying in water. And I was in him at that moment, in this body of water. But the things that he is, there was massive amounts of information. And not just information, it was the most wisest information. And there was so much of it, it's like hearing nothing but answers, the most complex answers, every nanosecond, like millions and billions of answers, which is too much. If you were to hear a million answers every nanosecond, you wouldn't be able to pick up on any of it. And even if you heard the answer, you wouldn't understand it unless you had the question. And so I could have tried to grab one of these beautiful things of wisdom and try to find the answer or the question to understand it. But by doing that, I would have let go of everything else. And it's a lot like the internet. The internet's flowing all this information, and you can grab one piece of information, but let's say if you did that, you'd lose everything else. So it's hard to describe. And I remember he spoke at that moment. He said, "There are no questions here, only answers." And it was like he was nothing but light. A question is darkness. An answer is light. And that's all he was just nothing but light, nothing but wisdom, nothing but answers. You would just have to come up with the right question, I guess. But I just decided to lay there and just let it all run through me. And it felt like it was being all downloaded to me. A lot of stuff, way more than I could fathom, libraries of information. And so I just allowed it, and I just laid there with him for a very long time. I had a lot of questions, as far as, I didn't get into those till later, but I had questions about my suffering as a child. Why didn't he help me? The stuff. But at this point, I'm still not even knowing that this is God, by the way. I'm just experiencing this. And after being there for hours, by the way, I all of a sudden, faintly in the distance, heard my heartbeat once. Boom. And then I could hear the water again. And somehow I could feel my body across the universe. And it's still sitting on this rock. And I could hear that water. And all of a sudden I thought to myself, what if I open my eyes? Because I'm laying in this quote unquote river of God. And I try to open my eyes ever so slowly. And my eyes begin to open, the ones on planet Earth. And it's the first time that I'd ever seen beauty that I could remember. The trees, the rocks, the river. I was sitting there and the sound of the water. And in fact, it reminds me of another scriptural verse that says, and the voice of God is like the sound of many waters. The water had something to do with all this. There's a reason that, like the Jesus, they would baptize in water. There's a reason for it that I believe has been lost. I don't think people really know how to utilize the technology of water. And this is coming, by the way. This has a lot to do with the age of Aquarius and the knowledge of water and hydrogen, by the way, because the word hydrogen actually means that which becomes water. And online, I'm known affectionately as the hydrogen man, which is kind of funny. So I'm opening my eyes and I see this immense beauty in all things. And it became very clear to me. It reminded me of a verse that says, the kingdom of God is within you and all around you. Talking about how you must be like a child to see the kingdom of God and all these things. But I could see it. I could finally see it. And I knew at that moment that this was heaven. So heaven is already here on earth. We just can't see it. I learned that we have a whole other set of eyes, a whole other set of ears, and we are actually asleep. We're not truly awake. When you're awake, you'll know it, and we're in the process of that obviously right now. But so this is happening and I'm just observing. I don't want to think because I could feel that thinking would disrupt it. I needed to be in complete peace in my mind, just like still waters. And when they're still, that's when they become a mirror and you can see things. So that's where I was at. And it felt like I was literally on the other side of the cosmos with God also. So I had like two brains and I've never felt anything like that. It was really strange feeling. And so being with him, I was in him, but here on earth, he was in me. So it was like a strange thing to try to describe. And I'm sitting here just enjoying this moment because I knew that I didn't know if this would ever happen again in my life. This was like a pivotal moment in my life. And it got weird when I turned my head and I saw my brother in the distance. He was very far away. I literally could have yelled to him and he wouldn't have heard me. The river was so loud. But I turned my head and he moves his head at exactly the same moment. And we kind of see each other from the distance. So I waved to him because he's always known about my journey. He's known about my suffering. My whole family knew. I mean, this was a very sad thing that was going on in our family. And so he walked to me and I could feel his thoughts. So I didn't want him to think much because it would almost disrupt the frequency in my mind. So I just told him, I said, if you want to learn something, now's the time. And if you don't want to, we can just go play in the river. And he's like, okay, yeah, I want to learn something. What's going on? Like, you've been sitting on this rock for hours. I thought you were maybe dead. You were sitting there motionless for so long. And it felt like like I had left for a while, right? And come back because this went on for hours. So he's sitting with me and I could hear what I called the voice of God in everywhere. It was literally everywhere. It was in every rock, the sky, the wind, the water, everything. And so he's trying to hear it. I'm trying to get my brother to see if he can hear this or to see if I'm just going crazy here because this is just like, what is going on? And a skeptic, I'm thinking, if I have a witness, this would be really great. So he tried for like 20 minutes and he got frustrated. He said, brother, I don't know what's going on with you, but I don't hear anything. He started saying he thought I was just kind of like crazy, man. He's like, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm done. I'm gonna go walk back and play in the river and do some swimming. And he goes to stand up, and this is when I believe I experienced what the scriptures, and this is not Christianity, but they talk about something called the Holy Spirit. And there's like this spirit, I believe, and it could be something else. I really don't know. But when he went to stand up, something almost took over me. I could feel when he would take over. I could stop it. I had complete free will, but I allowed it. And so he goes to get up and my arm moves like ninja quick, just like boom, and it grabs his wrist as he's trying to stand up. So I held him. And he's kind of like, what are you doing, And then I started squeezing his forearm really, really tight. And it actually felt like I was going to hurt him. And I felt like infinite strength. I felt like I could crush a rock. It was so strange. And I'm squeezing him. And that's when he turned and we both locked eyes. And he was nervous. He's like, what are you doing? Like, you're going to hurt me. He was about to tell me that. And then that's when I've never in my life been able to look at someone's eyes the way that I did at that moment, where I could see everything in him, right through him, the universe in him, everything. And it was so strange. And then when we locked, it almost felt like I was locking into his soul that's out in the universe. So something was going on in the other world, and something's going on in this world. And that's when I told him, I said, can't you hear it? Like, because he was trying to hear the sound. And when I spoke, that wasn't me again, because I was even put off by it. I was like, dude, that's kind of aggressive. Like, the way that you're talking, it's almost kind of creepy. It was so stern, And I said that to him. And then the moment I said it, boom, the sound came over that I was already hearing, but now it came over him. And he told me to this day, he said, brother, the moment I heard it, he goes, my vision just went dark. He goes, I couldn't see anything. My eyes were just like, it didn't matter that they were open. And he said, and I saw all my sin. I saw all my darkness. And he panicked. In fact, when this happened, he tried to run. He literally tried to run away, and he didn't even get his foot off the ground. And this is when God spoke. And God said, there is no place you can run to, no place you can hide, no rock you can't crawl under. And that's what he said. And then my brother just froze. And he felt like, he goes, the price is death. He's like, this thing is going to kill me, because he still didn't recognize it was the Almighty. I didn't either. Like I said, it was so strange. And my brother's panicking at this point. And it reminds me of another scriptural verse that says, when these guys were before God, it said, and they trembled before his might. And I never understood why we would be so scared of God, but I now understand why. And it's because God functions like a light and a mirror that you've never known, that you don't remember. And this light shines right through you, right into your soul, and exposes everything. There's nothing you can hide. It's all exposed. And so it makes people panic, because there's a lot of things that humans try to hide on a subconscious level. They hide a lot. And a lot of it is for self-protection purposes. So if you have trauma, this is why people bury their trauma in different things. And so there is a deep-rooted pain within all of humanity. And most people run away from it. And my brother physically tried to run away from it, and he couldn't even do that. It was kind of hilarious that he tried, but it was so instinctual. And then that's when I spoke, and I said, because I'm still holding on to his arm, and my brother's now in a different world, is what he feels like. And I just said, brother, he's not going to hurt you. Don't be afraid. I had to let him know, don't be afraid, because he was in so much panic. And he tells me to this day, he's like, when I heard your voice, he said, I followed your voice, and I turned around and I saw you. He saw me, and all of a sudden his vision came back. And then he just looked at me and he said, what is it? Like, what is this? And at the moment, one of the things that helped me do a very good journey to the other side and all this, and what was taught to me along the way, was to let go of all my ideas, to let go of all my preconceived notions, because our ideas will affect what we see. So if I believe in Buddhism, I'm going to see Buddha. If I believe in Jesus, I'm going to see Jesus. But I always wanted to just get all the ideas out, just show me the truth. That's what I wanted. And so I saw a little bit of everything, right? I saw a being of light that was like an angel. You could have called her Jesus. You could have called her the Holy Spirit. Then all of a sudden I see monks, and then all of a sudden God was just completely something else. And there's a lot of places. The place is very vast. But they took me specifically to God, who seems to be at the center of it all, by the way. Almost like at the center of the Garden of Eden type of deal. And so my brother's like, ask me, what is this? What's going on? And with the sound that is coming with God, there's like a consciousness to it. It's hard to describe, that you felt, this consciousness with this sound. And then all of a sudden once my brother and he calms down, the Almighty starts speaking to both of us. So he starts showing us both visions, and we're getting visions. And I look over to my brother and I'm like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Because now I need to confirm. Again, I'm back to it's not just that I'm being a doubter. I'm trying to confirm as we go. And I didn't want to tell my brother what I'm seeing. I wanted him to confirm it. So I said, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And he goes, I see mountains, which is exactly what I was being shown. I was showing mountains, specifically 3. And it was weird because the snow in the mountains looked like a beard. It looked like a person's face, like 3 old wise men. And then God spoke again. He didn't speak a lot, but at this moment he said, this is where I reside. And I thought it was odd. I'm like, you reside in the mountains? Like, I was really confused. To this day, I still kind of don't totally understand what that's all about. But so he said that to us. And then my brother's clearly hearing the sound at this point because I'm kind of asking him, like, you're hearing the sound, right? He's like, yeah, it sounds like, oh, it's like this. We can't mimic it. The reason that he couldn't hear it before, too, it was one of the things that I forgot to mention, is that I kept telling him, I said, stop trying to hear it with your ears. And he's like, what are you talking about? That's all I got, And I said, try to use your other ears. Because that's in these moments, that's when I realized we have a whole other set of ears that we don't use. And we have a whole other set of eyes. And we don't actually know how to use them. In time, we will. But we have this whole other sense of these other senses. And so, but my brother is in this moment. He's hearing it. We're seeing the mountains. And then that's when my brother is like, kind of looking around, and he said, where's the sound coming from? He said, it literally sounds like it's coming from everywhere. And I don't even know if you can fathom the idea of it coming from everywhere. We're talking about the soil or the rock below your feet. We're talking about the wind. We're talking about the light. We're talking about everything. I've never heard anything that's like this surround sound. It was just like crazy everywhere. You can't pinpoint the sound. And so my brother looks at me and he's like, where is this coming from? Like, I can't tell where it's coming from. And then the thing took over me again. And I just tilted my head back and I opened my mouth kind of big. And then the sound just got really loud. And my brother's looking at me and he's like, oh my God, it's coming from inside of you. Somehow, and this is meant for all humans, by the way. There's no like, oh, some humans more special than others. I was shown that this is what we are made for. This is what we are destined for. And when you find God within you, the source of all life, all the things that are alive in this world come alive to you. So that's why I could hear it in every living thing, every bug, every tree, every rock, everything that was alive, God was there. And you could see it. You could actually see the light in all things. And that's when I saw the kingdom. And it was beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing I had seen up to this point in my life. And I remember feeling all the doubt that I ever had. I literally felt it into the core of my bones. Any doubt I ever had just went away. I now knew that God was real. It was obvious at this point. And when all that doubt went away, I felt like a lot of my questions had been answered. And I just felt like he's real and we just don't understand him. And, not to skip forward, but after all these experiences and all the things, and there's a lot of things that were taught to me. I mean, I have a library. The amount of information that was given to me is kind of, even some of it will be very hard to explain first, but let alone for humans to understand it first. Like some of them, which was really shocking to me, was how much he referred to the Bible. It was strange to me because I'm like, the Bible? This is, but he showed me, and I know this will probably upset a lot of people, the whole Bible is not correct. There is both good and evil in the scripture. And it's very difficult to decipher which part is real and which part has been manipulated or misunderstood. And it honestly, I think it's impossible almost unless he were to show you. And he started showing me. Like I could tell you some of the strangest verses that are misunderstood and what they really mean. It's crazy. And I don't like to necessarily, have that on me, because he also showed me the level of responsibility of speaking truth. And it scared me, because he showed me that if you are a leader of people, like let's say you're like a pastor or something, and you have your congregation or whatever, and if you're teaching these people something that's not particularly true, you may think it is, but let's say you're wrong about something. What the Almighty showed me was the weight of their souls is now on you, because you've decided to be their leader. And if you're teaching them something that's wrong or taking them down the wrong way, it's a lot of pain on your soul. And when I saw that, it scared me in the sense that I never want to be a guru. I never want to be a pastor. I don't want to be a spiritual leader. That's not what I would want to do. Unless I had absolute truth, then I wouldn't want to say it, because that's how much it scared me, because he showed me the weight of that. And it was heavy, really heavy. You don't want to be responsible for other people's souls, unless you really know what you're doing. And so all these years went by, and I thought it was weird. Has nobody ever had an experience like this? Like, this is so wild, right? Can I not find it in a book? Can I not find it somewhere? Because the God you read about everywhere else is not this particular God. And I had this, because I started having medical issues, I was doing this one strange cleanse, and it caused a very spiritual experience, which I did not expect. And it led me down this path where, I don't need to share that story. Maybe we can do that one a different time, because I've had all these weird things happen and they're kind of long stories. But it led me down a path of wanting to figure out, where did this cleanse come from? It was so unique, so strange. And I just didn't think that any human could have come up with it, really. It had to be taught to you. And then I ended up finding it, if you're not going to believe this, in this book of all places. And this book is called The Assene Gospel of Peace. And by the way, the secret, because there's a secret that I'll divulge more in the future, how there is a path where you can get to God. And you can have that experience yourself. You don't need to have a religion, or you don't need to give money. There's almost like a secret to it. And a lot of it is in here. But I've had many people try to read this book, and you just won't understand it. I actually read this book, and it made no sense to me until I started remembering what had happened, and then it made perfect sense. And the strange thing about this book, this is the one thing that, if you were to read this, you'd think this is a bunch of nonsense. That's what I thought, being the skeptic that I am. It wasn't until I read the last 4 pages that everything changed. Because in this book, there's a man that they call Jesus. And you hear all these stories in here that you've never heard about him before, ever. Supposedly, it was translated by this guy who was translating stuff from the hidden archives of the Vatican. And again, I would have been like, whatever, I wouldn't have believed any of this. But those last 4 pages, Jesus describes the other side, and he describes God with utter perfection in a way that I've never seen anywhere, not in the Bible, nowhere. And because I had been there, I knew that it was real. And I could even, and so it was very strange. Even the pictures are odd to me, that how accurate some of these pictures are. I'm like, who drew these? Like, who did this? But notice here that the very last 4 pages, what does it start with? And it says, the holy streams. Now, the holy streams, remember I was saying that God is like this river, like a stream of water. And as you read it, you'll read stuff that makes no sense. Like, you'll read stuff like, he says, in the heat of noontide, all the creatures are still and seek the shade, and the angel of the earthly mother are silent for a space. And he's going into this stuff, and he talks about the holy stream of sound. So this is a sound that I was talking about. And then he goes, if you could only actually hear it, and he said, you can only hear it in the silence. So in the silence, it's there. And so he goes into this whole thing, and the stream where basically everything's born from. So he's describing this whole thing that if you were reading it, you wouldn't probably understand what the heck he's talking about. But then he says one crucial word, or set of words, that changed everything for me. He said, for this is God, if you did but know it. And that just shows you how much we really don't understand him. We've never seen him. We don't get it. And that to me became very clear, because anybody who has, I would know. And I've always been hesitant to reveal this, because a lot of people are going to start making the same claim. But one of the things, and I don't care if people make those claims, it's just that you want people who are really saying the truth, because you need to know what's true and what isn't. But what shocked me was, I was on this trip, actually not long ago. I was in Japan, because I've been researching. So I solved my medical problems, by the way. So I wasn't even supposed to be alive right now. And I found this secret technology in Japan. In fact, if people want to look at it, it's on a website called Holy Hydrogen. Of all things, Holy Hydrogen, the holy streams, right? It just gets weirder and weirder. And this technology, if people should read the story of the guy who developed it, because it's so interesting. And it was his poor daughter who was basically dying, and he had to develop a technology to try to save his daughter. It's the most beautiful thing from the heart. I've never met the man, but one day I hope to, because I believe he saved my life with his technology that he developed. And I've seen his technology do the craziest of things. The most recent one is a guy with Parkinson's who couldn't walk. He's walking again. People with dementia and Alzheimer's who don't recognize their own daughters, recognizing them again. My own brother who had kidney failure, recovering his kidneys. That's supposed to be impossible. And so, my heart condition. My heart condition is totally gone. I never needed surgery. I was told I needed it. It was very severe. It was totally documented. I just helped a woman who's almost 100 years old with multiple heart conditions. Her doctor said she was going to die. The heart conditions are gone. And she got off the pharmaceuticals. So miracle after miracle. And what's interesting is there's a place on earth. Have you ever heard of a place called Lourdes, France? So they have like the holy waters of Lourdes. People drink the water from there and they heal. And they couldn't understand why. They named this machine after that place. The Lourdes Hydrofix is what they call it. Because that water that's coming naturally from planet Earth, by the way, is full of hydrogen. And this machine that he developed it's specifically designed to make hydrogen a certain way that copies Mother Nature, right? So anyway, so this whole, crazy thing that's basically happening. And so I became very fascinated with hydrogen. I became the Hydrogen Man on my YouTube channel because of what it had done for me and what it's done for so many other people. And so ultimately what's interesting is one of the key components to getting to the other side is something that Jesus used to tell people all the time. Remember, he used to always say, peace be with you. So instead of saying God be with you, he was saying peace be with you. And I discovered that the peace is what opens the door to be able to reach him. And ironically, what's the name of the book? The Assene Gospel of Peace. So peace is the common theme. And what I've realized about humanity is we have no peace. This is a huge problem right now. And this is why people feel all the anxiety, all the issues. We have all the wars. We have all the conflict. And so there's just so much going on, in regards to all this. But he's definitely real. He's definitely there. And that's kind of, the gist of the story, if I, without going into crazy, crazy detail, but that's kind of the gist of what happened and what ultimately changed my life. And I know he's real now. And, I think it's important for us to be kind. He showed me how whenever we do something mean to somebody else, like you're going to feel it later in the future. Like you're causing pain to yourself by being cruel to others or just not being the nicest to others. There's like, it's another funny Bible verse where Jesus was asked, of all your teachings, like if you could simplify, what's the most important thing that we could learn? And he said, love one another as I have loved you. Things that are that simple that really make a big impact. But there was just so much to share. I remember one thing I was going to share that blew my mind because I said I was in Japan studying the hydrogen thing. And that's when where I left off. I remember now, I was at the store buying groceries and I'm at the store and I look over and there's this giant like painting or mural or poster of some kind, like really big. But the reason it blew my mind is because I looked at it and it was exactly what I saw when I was on the other side. It was those monks in a circle, and at the center of it, they had Buddha's face, which, see, it's just an imagery or symbolic for God. That's what it basically means, the Buddha head, even though he doesn't look like that, it's symbolic. When I saw it, it blew my mind because I'm like, wait a second, I've seen that, and there's no way that somebody drew that if they haven't been to the other side. They'd had to have seen it. So I remember asking some people, I'm like, who drew that? Where did that come from? And they said, oh, that's Kukai. Haven't you ever heard of Kukai? And I was like, no, I've never heard of Kukai. Who is this guy? So I started learning about Kukai, and this guy was like the Japanese Jesus. This guy was unbelievable. He's like the first monk to ever self-mummify in Japan. His body still exists. I mean, he, quote unquote, died a long time ago. His body didn't decompose because he had a method of diet and meditation to prepare his body to be what he called in suspended animation. So it's very weird. The monks still bring him food to this day. I mean, it's such a wild story, but he had these images, they call it like a mandala of sorts. And the reason it was so odd is because this particular one, they called it the womb realm, like the mother's womb. And the reason that was odd was because when I was on the other side, they took me back to when I was in my mother's womb. I was able to relive that. I know what it feels like to be in the mother's womb now. I know the emotions. I know you basically feel really, really like held, like you're being hugged, and it's warm, so you don't even know what cold feels like, and you're not suffering at all, and you don't even have to eat. All the nutrients are quote unquote coming to you. But the most important part that I felt when I was in my mother's womb was the greatest peace I've ever had as a human. I was so peaceful in that realm because I knew no pain. I knew no suffering. I didn't know anything of this world. And I could feel my mother's love immensely. And so I really got to feel that whole thing. And it gave me a lot of appreciation and understanding about children and babies and where they're at. And there's another really interesting part in this book. If I can touch on it really quick, when he's describing, quote unquote, God and all this stuff, he says one really interesting thing, and let's see if I can find it, because he basically says that when you're born, like when you give birth, and I'm trying to find the actual verse here, but he says something. So right here he says, I tell you truly, when we are born, we enter the world with the sound of God in our ears. And I know that because I experienced it. When you're born, that sound that I'm talking about, when a baby is born, a baby can hear it. A baby is connected to God. We just don't know it yet. We don't understand completely. But that's part of the reason when Jesus talks about you must be like a child, because they can see the kingdom of God. Why? Because their hearts are so open. But as I said, with every little thing that happens to a child that hurts their feelings, their heart is slowly closing, and it affects them. So this is a very profound, important thing to understand, that we do this to each other, and it causes problems, into the future. So that was kind of a really interesting thing. And then to answer your question, I did get to ask the Almighty, I'm like, so where were you? I was praying for you when I was a kid. I really, really needed help, and you weren't showing up. So I was literally thinking that you don't even exist. So he gives me the vision again, because he gives you these visions and emotions and conveys so much information in like 1 second. And he shows me a vision of him actually watching over me when I was a kid. And I could see myself praying and asking for help and being in so much pain. And I'm like, so why didn't you help me? And then this is when he made it. And I was actually, to be honest, I was kind of upset. So I was like, you better have a good answer, because I can't think of a good answer for you not to help me. I need you to tell me what's going on. And he quickly made me put my tail between my legs like a dog, because his answer was, first of all, he said, I allowed it. And that was a very confusing thing for me. I'm like, wait a second. I'm asking you why you didn't take this pain away or help me. And now you're telling me that you're the one who allowed it? I'm like, very confusing, right? And then, of course, he said, for if I hadn't, you would have never found me. And I realized when he conveyed this message to me that it was my extreme pain and suffering that caused a domino effect of me to look so hard, and to the point where I looked beyond religion. I mean, I tried the religion and didn't go anywhere. I'm not saying anything negative about religion, but for me, going to the church and getting baptized or going to Buddhist temples and all this stuff, nothing got me where I was looking for. And it was this moment in nature by myself where I'd inched so close to death, but I'd always longed for him in my heart, because I was looking, what's funny is that I was looking for happiness. I wasn't necessarily looking for God. I just wanted this pain. But you don't realize that health and happiness have a lot to do with God, actually, and the spiritual path. And so anyway, so I ended up, getting that answer from that he allowed it. And then, of course, my question begins to be, well, if you allowed it, who caused it? Like, you may have not caused it, but you allowed it. And that's when I basically realized I had chosen this. And so I couldn't be mad at anybody but myself. I'm like, wait a second, what? I volunteered for this? And it just reminds me of another scriptural verse that says, many are called, but few are chosen. So I was called to do something, and I didn't realize that that's something, that a path that I had chosen. And once I realized that, I was never angry at him again. And I understand and accept that I volunteered for this for a reason. And what I really need to do is figure that out and figure out what this reason is and try to find my way. And yeah, I'm very unhappy about the pain I've been through, I highly regret what I tried to do to my body so many times, because the body is his temple, and it's a thing that should be actually respected and cherished. And instead, I was abusing it and doing some pretty bad things to it, which made me feel very, very bad, about what I had done. So I had to really repent for that, and try to find a way to forgive myself, because I've been holding on to that for a very long time. And so those are some things that he conveyed to me, and that just changed everything. It just changed the way that I view life, the way that I've been living my life, and just trying to find the soul's purpose more than the things of the flesh. You know, the Almighty taught me some really weird things about how we should govern nations, which I thought was really odd. I'm like, why are you telling me? I'm not the president, right? But how to govern nations, how people should be almost treated or governed to bring the most out of them and the good out of them. And foundationally, his teaching is we should never harm the water or the air or the wind. That was foundational. He literally said, any action you're going to take, you must first ask yourself, will it harm the air or the water? And when I saw it like in a vision, I realized virtually everything we do harms the air and the water, because everything requires energy, and we use energies that pollute, even if they pollute, regardless of the level that they pollute, whether it's fossil fuels or nuclear, energy or whatever. And so one of the things that I first started to learn, because I was really sick and my medical conditions got really severe, is one, I started learning everything about water. I literally became a water expert. This is actually a third-party lab test. And if I were to show you just some examples, like the stuff that's in, this is all stuff in our water, and there's pages and pages, and it's darn right creepy what's in our water and the harm that it causes. And guess who water affects the most? Little babies. Because their kidneys aren't fully developed, their livers aren't fully developed, and our water is so contaminated. And by the way, everywhere. Don't think, oh, I'm out in the boonies or I got well water and it's better. No, I've seen the lab tests. It's polluted everywhere. So I had to learn first how to clean water. And you may think a water filter is good enough. It isn't. I've seen the numbers and what water filters can do. There's even been some lawsuits against some water filtration companies for claims. I'm not going to make any claims today, and I'm not going to make any give any medical advice. I'm just telling you guys what I've learned and what I went through. So you can see here, like some of these chemicals, like especially PFAS. These are all the numbers of what's in the water. And look next to it after you run it through what's called a carbon distiller. This is the method I use. Everything's at a 0. And so if people want to see what I use to clean water, on my YouTube channel, you can watch video 388, because I educate on this. And because the reason that I teach people is because your spirituality and a spiritual connection has so much to do with your body being at peace, but also more pure and in good health. And that's why the evil in the world wants to pollute everything so much. It fogs the mind, which fogs the heart. It's confusing, and they keep you in this little rat race so that you're always busy looking, for different things and trying to almost numb the pain that you feel with whether it's an iPhone or a television or some form of entertainment or some food, or it's always something, because you have no peace, by the way. You're actually looking for peace is what you're looking for. You may eat something delicious and it feels like, oh, I feel so good. You have peace for a moment and then it goes away again. So it's never really truly there. So this is how you truly clean water. And water, to me, from everything that I've learned, is absolutely sacred. The wind and the water and hydrogen are like some of the closest things to God and really understanding him. In fact, hydrogen, I call it the ascension molecule, because it literally ascends like a balloon. And not a lot of things can just ascend like that. And it goes all the way to the heavens. So I teach how to clean water. Oh, yes, if people want to know what I use, you don't have to use what I use, but what I use, I always pick the best stuff. And it's a website called mypurewater.com. And then people like coupons. If you want a coupon code, you can use a code called Uprising144K. If you want to support what I've been trying to do, everything I do is for free. So any money I spend or that I even get, it's all towards lab reports and different stuff so people can know what they can do to help their lives. And then the hydrogen thing was really wild. The Japanese are #1 in the world when it comes to hydrogen technology. And so I was so ill that I literally, for a lot of times, I was just totally bedridden. So I was totally bedridden, had a ton of pain, had some liver and kidney issues because of all the poisoning I had done to myself, and the heart condition on top of all of that. I had a lot of gut issues and autoimmune kind of issues. I even had tumors in my body. So I just had a lot of problems. And so I needed to try to find my way. And of course, I prayed for guidance. And it was wild because within 1 or 2 weeks, things began to be so easy for me to understanding health, which I was never a health guru. I never thought I'd be a health guru. I'm still shocked at the things that I know and understand. I've actually made predictions about certain health, for example, modalities that I've implemented. And literally years later, there's been scientific studies on the exact method that I created to prove that I was right. And this has happened so many times because somehow it comes easy to me now. And so I've been teaching people and helping people get their health back, whether for them, sometimes their children, sometimes even their animals, and a lot of times just family and people, that they care about. And so I share all the information on the internet for free. And the big, most powerful tools that I've ever seen were clean water and clean, properly made hydrogen. It's really bugged me because in the world of hydrogen, there's like little gimmicky things like these little bottles that they sell. And don't use these. Or they sell little hydrogen tablets. I don't use those, nor do I recommend them. Hydrogen's supposed to be extremely pure, and it takes a certain level of technology to make it really pure. Otherwise, it could potentially not be very good for you, whether it's heavy metals or different types of contamination. So that's what I started connecting with a lot with the hydrogen and realizing how spiritual it is and the profound effects that it can have. Like you could even meditate while inhaling hydrogen and the way that it affects the pineal gland and the brain too. In fact, it's been really amazing. I believe in the future they're gonna realize this more. I think I'm kind of on the cutting edge of this right now where most people don't understand it. But you should see what it does to the blood. You should see it, it's so unbelievable. Video number 8 is good. 68 is also good. But I think it's 68. There was a doctor. So I've trained a lot of doctors and naturopaths on my methods because they've seen it work. And they saw some of these videos and they literally said, that's impossible. Like that, you can't do that to the blood. It's impossible. And it was a live blood analysis from a laboratory in Japan. And so this one doctor was like so skeptical, kind of like me. And she literally went out and bought the same equipment, which is the one from that website called Holy Hydrogen, put it through the same lab test, and the results came back exactly the same. And she said, I just can't believe what this stuff can do. And she started giving it to her elderly mother, who's almost 100 years old. And she used to give her elderly mother all these different things, supplements and different stuff. And then her mother apparently told her one day, she said, look, you brought me a lot of things throughout the years, but that water you're bringing me, whatever that is, she goes, I don't even know what it is. It just looks like water to me. She said, that's the one that's making the changes. Because she went from barely being able to stand up and walk around for like 2 minutes to being able to walk around for like 2-3 hours in the period of roughly 6 months. And so it was so transformative. It's just unbelievable. It's literally hard to believe. The good news is, this is how I stumbled upon it, is that there's a lot of scientific evidence that supports it. So, for example, they don't just have like 10 studies on hydrogen or 20 studies. There's like over 2,000 studies. And molecular hydrogen is a gas, kind of like oxygen is a gas. And so in Japan, they have university hospitals that already use it medically. So this is like the real deal. And one of the things they really use it a lot is for heart conditions. So that's why really good success with that. And also, I mean, it's even positive for cancer, positive for diabetes, a lot of gut issues. There's so many different things that it's good for, or appears to be good for. But the brain is a really, really interesting one because these people with dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, these different cognitive issues that people are having, and the way that the hydrogen not only affects your blood, and even they've done something called thermoimaging on the body, and how the Japanese found out that the core body temperature of humans who have like cancer or certain diseases is actually lower than it should be. And what does hydrogen do? It increases core body temperature. So, which is what little babies usually have, very healthy core body temperatures. And when you get old, they get lower than they're supposed to be. So just there's so much, the way that it impacts the body is so phenomenal. And I believe it's going to change a lot of things. In fact, I think the age of Aquarius has a lot to do with the knowledge of water and hydrogen. Aquarius, obviously, we know that it has to do with water, and the word hydrogen actually means that which becomes water. So it's a very sacred molecule that I don't think the world understands yet, but they will. It's coming in the future. There's a lot of things coming.
Oh,
Yeah, so the first thing is if people want to support what I'm doing, and it's free to support it, you can go to YouTube, subscribe. I would go to Rumble and subscribe, and then Twitter, or otherwise known as X, and Instagram, and subscribe. So find me on all the platforms because I've been threatened on multiple platforms where they've tried to take me down, which I find odd because I'm so small. I don't know why they've been after me so harshly. And so if something ever happens to one, you're only going to find me if you're one of the other ones. And it just helps, getting more subscriptions because that was my goal. My goal was to get enough subscribers to where the internet or YouTube is technically paying me. So that way I can continue to help everybody for free. That was kind of like my goal because I don't like to charge people. I really don't want to charge people, but we all have to eat and, make a living, quote unquote. So I wanted it to be that way where the internet was doing it and people didn't have to. So that would be very helpful. And, giving the videos thumbs up and commenting, and you know how all that is and how all that works. And then people can email me directly if they want to. Of course, I always prefer for people to just watch the videos and learn from there. I do individualized consults, although I'm very selective about who I work with because I'm strict. And I only want to work with people who really want to put in the effort because it's going to take effort. But they can email me at uprising144k at gmail.com. So that's the email. And, people can ask any other questions that they might have. And I'll always do my best to reach back out to people and be of service in any way I can.